All right, hello everyone. I'm going to let him change over the presentation so I can just say this without a microphone. Luckily I'm loud, so you can still hear me until I get the mic back. I'm Dylan Emery. I'm one of the co-founders of Last Word, which is now part of the Bonhill Group. So what I thought I'd do is just give you, so I'm a financial journalist originally, as well as directing obviously one of the company. So I'm going to take you through the history and the where we've grown from Bonhill. Bonhill is a very new venture, and thank you again for participating in it, because obviously without you guys we couldn't have done it. So I'm going to tell you kind of where we're at in terms of that, and then also give you some insight that we know about, because as a financial media company, all of our readers for the Last Word bit of Bonhill, all of them are financial intermediaries. They're all fund buyers, professional investors. So as you are obviously investors yourselves, and some of you I guess are also professional investors, you thought you might be interested in what the rest of the investment world is doing. So let's start with a short history of where we're at now. So as you've already been told, in fact, Vitesse Media was the sort of starting point. Vitesse Media has been around for many, many years, and I, as a financial journalist, know well about Vitesse Media. It is a company that is remained small for a long period of time. It is a company that was small and yet unsuccessful, as we like to put it. It didn't really manage to do much with it. Lovely people, but nonetheless never really managed to grow, never really managed to get really beyond the state that it was in. And I think that was why I think it was kind of typical for Simon to come along and see it and go, you know, what is there here that is of value? Because that's what he was looking for. Simon's vision is a global media company and business to business, because B2B companies, B2B media companies have got many more avenues for making financial kind of profits than other sorts of business. So for him, it was very, very interesting. So he came in, at the time that he came in, the 2017 revenues for Vitesse were about 2.5 million total revenues. Total profit, which would have been estimated because he came in at roughly at that time, nothing. They weren't making any money. They were not profitable. So that is why Simon came in at that stage, basically. Turned it into Bonhill, so that's the new name, but it's basically the same. Again, these are, well-respected small brands that are, they're well-respected, just not making any money. And he managed to turn it, at least even within that actual time, into not nothing. So at least it wasn't actually losing money. So that was the starting point for Bonhill. Actually, a really interesting thing to add is that one of the biggest areas of growth for Bonhill, because basically you've got Bonhill in Old Street, which is just very near here, and they've just got these small number of these brands, and that one of the biggest growing areas, even within that relatively small company, is into diversity. So you've got this brand called Diversity Q. It's just basically like a website, and they do events and things for business people who are really interested in diversity, which has become huge globally. Okay, so obviously the things about having good gender equality, people from different ethnicities, people from different sexual orientations, and it's come from being not just like a regulatory issue where you need to do it because otherwise you'll literally get into legal trouble if you're, essentially systematically preventing people from certain ethnicities or whatever, or, gender biases or whatever in your firm. But also it's become very obvious to people in the whole of the industry that we are massively missing out on a lot of talent because we're systematically, effectively excluding them. And one of the things that we're involved with at Last Word is basically a big project by a lot of the big fund groups, including some of the biggest like BlackRock and so on, involved Schroders, and they are basically, their CEOs are getting together and saying, we actively are going to encourage people who are from different ethnicities and groups and genders, sexual orientations, come and work for us. We will make sure you're okay, because they realize they're missing out on talent because if people go, it's the city, it's finance, my kind of person isn't allowed there. So Diversity Q, part of it, it's got this award, which is Women in Finance and also Women in IT. It used to be one event a year in London, very successful, but it could have been so much bigger. So Simon came in, and basically now it's hugely successful. There's now a Women in IT awards in Toronto, in Dublin, in Singapore, in New York, and the same with Women in Finance as well, in Dublin also, and in New York, I believe. So anyway, it's a big area of growth, so hopefully you find that interesting. Right, back to the main story. So what happened next? So we had Bonhill, small number of companies, relatively small revenue, already had some success there. Then Crane came up. So Investment News, for those who don't know, is the biggest single brand for financial advisors in the US. Okay, so there's about 250,000 financial advisors in the US who actually actively buy funds. Now, many of them don't. Anyway, there's a whole complicated thing about how many of them actually choose funds and how many, use models. But there's 250,000 people who are financial advisors, and there's about 650,000 people who read investment news because they're all the people who work in those companies and in associated industries. So it's actually huge, but it's a very traditional business. Okay, so it's print, it's got websites, it does some events as well, but really it's all about print and digital. Okay, and it makes money through advertising and other bits and bobs, and also subscribers. It has literally paid for subscribers. So that's fine, and Crane own it. Crane are again, New York-based business, very well established. But the investment news part of it, and in fact generally the financial services part of it, was not, and still isn't, wasn't like a key area of interest and focus for the people who managed it. There's a whole interesting story about it's a family-owned business and there's brothers and so on, and basically each side has each. It's an interesting story which I can talk about afterwards if you're interested. But basically, investment news is regarded as a kind of a cash cow, which they could use, but they didn't really put lots of attention on developing it for the future. Most of it is like Crane is like automotive, healthcare, plastics. They've got lots of stuff on plastics as well. They have one called the European Rubber Journal, which is not nearly as exciting as you might believe. But anyway, so they weren't, so it was fine. But obviously, again, it's a perfect example, right? Simon saw that and went, this is a great business. It's cash generative. It's got a brilliant part of the market, but it's not really set up for the future. What can we do? Well, he raised money from people such as yourselves and bought it. So then that switched the revenues for the Bonhill Group. In 2018, this is all rough because obviously a lot of the purchases were in the middle of the year, so this is kind of estimated. Around 19 million, apparently. This is, you have to ask Simon for the more accurate versions of it. And the profit was about 3 million, okay? So suddenly it's looking already a lot more healthy. So then, last word. So again, it's about this thing, the vision. What is the vision for the company? What is driving the company? Not just a series of disassociated investments, but what are we good at? What drives the company? And what Simon wants to do is create a global media company that is just like very, very good at what it does. And it wants to do so by having insight into its readers. The big weakness that all traditional media agencies have, media outlets have, is they don't really understand their readers. They don't know anything about them. They'll go on their websites, but they don't really know what each of them do. They don't really have that personal relationship with them, which is why you're all desperately asked, can you log in, please? Can you give us some more information about yourselves? Well, that is us in the media, journalists like myself, desperately catching up. Whereas you go to Facebook and you ask them, can I advertise? I want everyone who lives in East London who is interested in violin, okay? Yes, you can do that, and you have to pay a certain amount, and they can segment it because people are giving that information. So that's the kind of sophistication that Simon wants to bring. Now, Last Word, which is my company, that's what we've been trying to do since we started the company. So Last Word has a whole bunch of different titles, but all of them are basically for professional investors. They're fund buyers, they're asset allocators, they're portfolio constructors, and we have been desperately trying to get that information from them. But we have an advantage. The advantage is we don't just have websites and newspapers and magazines, but also we have events. And in the events, we're literally meeting a large chunk of these people because they're in manageable numbers. There's just 10, 20,000 maybe in the world that we really care about who actually make these investment decisions. So that's actually a kind of manageable number that you can get to know. You can meet like the top ones, literally by running events for them. And also we have a big research arm as well. And the research arm is really what adds the value because the research we do, which is research into professional investors, what do they think? What are they going to do next? That is the value because if you know that, then you can suddenly create a business where by helping them, by giving them the right information, they will literally help you back. They'll come to your events, they'll read your publications, and you can then make money out of it. So the revenues for 2019, approximate, obviously, will now be around 30 million, and the profit somewhere between 4 and 4.5 million. Okay, so that's where we're at, and this is just the very beginning. So this is the starting point for Bonhill. So we're all very excited. Over at Last Word, I can say we're very excited, so it's really fun. So I thought, in the small amount of time I've got, because we do have a big research arm, I'd give you some insights. You're all investors. You're investors in us, for a start, so thank you. But also, you might be interested in what all the other professional investors are doing globally. And that is a massive chunk of what we do at Last Word. So obviously, we have all the media, and the websites and the magazines and so on. But at the core of it, there is the Last Word research, where we're essentially doing like surveys and in-depth interviews, and we're constantly finding out what the big investors are thinking. So I'm going to talk just a brief insight into some of the stuff how we would analyze the market in terms of how we're setting ourselves up for the future. We have a problem. Okay? And the problem is, which the entire fund management industry is suffering from, and Amati, I'm sure, is exactly the same, which is that people have been pulling money out of the markets at a massive rate. And they've been doing so for the last 6-7 months or so. The more niche you are, probably the less you suffer, but the big groups have massively been suffering. And the problem really derives from this. So now, this data comes from a product we create in Last Word called Future Flows. Future Flows is a product literally for fund management groups. We sell it to fund management groups, and it basically tracks the forward-looking investment sentiment of like all professional fund buyers, like private bankers and pension fund managers and discretionary fund managers throughout the whole of the world. We've got 18 countries, and it's all the top-level people. Okay, people who buy funds, like Amati, in fact. So this is their macroeconomic outlook, all aggregated now, just so I thought I'd give you the overall picture. So this is from Q. I'm going to have to go off microphone, you just have to hear me. So from the beginning of 2017, this is the percentage of the respondents from all these big investors, the percentage of respondents who were optimistic about the macroeconomic future, and you've seen a massive plunge halfway through last year. Now the good news is, for all of us, especially us in the industry, is that it has come to a still here. So it's roughly come to a sort of static point in the last 3 months or 4 months. The number of people who regard it as a neutral outlook, so they're not positive or negative, has risen, but this is the problem, is that these professional investors, about 25% of them are all saying they're pessimistic about the macro outlook. That is what has caused the problem. So therefore they take their clients' money and they put it into cash. And you guys probably have private bankers and so on, and have your discretionary fund managers, and they might have been advising similar things. So that's the problem. So when that happens, this is what happens. So this is again from the kind of beginning of March 2017, and you can basically see super healthy. This is multi-asset funds, and then suddenly in the last 6 months, massive outflows. Okay, billions, literally billions every single month, just going out of mutual funds in all these areas. This is interesting. Equity funds, some positive months, some negative months, but the positive months are all into passives, more or less. Okay, except for some boutiques. So boutiques who've got a very specific alpha generating capacity, they can do okay, but the big kind of slightly close to index tracking fund management groups, they're just being losing to the passives. And you can see fixed income is interesting, basically very, very healthy fixed income, and then suddenly again in the last 6 months, lots of money out, except for the last 3 months. And suddenly people put money back in, but it was into government bonds and a little bit back into high yield and investment grade debt because they've been basically putting so much out in the previous years. So that's kind of where we're at. So the question is, where has it gone? I mean, I'll just give you basically 2017, everyone was putting money into everything. They were taking money out of government bonds and out of US equities a bit, but everything else is kind of fair game. There was interesting stuff. Alternatives were great, absolute return, unconstrained bond funds doing brilliantly. And the following year, what happened was suddenly everything went much more, in 2018, so last year, everything went a lot more problematic. Equities were still okay overall, except for European equities. Everyone just sold out of their European equity exposure. But fixed income, everyone started selling out just generally. They were very, very concerned. I imagine you probably did the same thing. Until the end of the beginning of this year, I should say, where suddenly things changed again, and things changed very quickly. First of all, they carry on selling off European equities. So that is now a horrible place if you're a European equity manager. People are just selling off huge amounts of it. And US equities have started being sold as well. But where it's positive is in global emerging market equities, in Asia, in China, on the bond side and also on the equity side. So just so you know, so you can you can benchmark your own asset allocation, your own investment ideas. What the professionals are saying they're going to do in the future is, also what they have been doing up to now, I should say, is pulling out of those developed markets and putting money, just basically looking for a little bit of money into emerging markets, and that's it. And meanwhile, all the alternatives, by the way, are all just red. People are selling out of all sorts. Now that has changed, but that was what it was up to until the end of March. So, question is, where will the money go next? So this is the last bit, basically. Where will it go next? So this is the heart of what we sell to fund management groups. So this is basically data that normally you pay lots of money for. So this is just a European, continental European fund buyers, okay? So basically hundreds of data points every single quarter. What do they want to buy? They want to buy private equity. They want to buy property. Emerging markets, yes. Infrastructure, private debt, emerging market credit. That is what they are expecting to buy. This is forward-looking data, and this data is literally from this morning, which is why we have to switch over the presentation. So this is the data, again, hundreds of fund buyers from across the whole of Europe. Okay, so that is what they are expecting to put money into over the next 12 months. Okay, so if you're interested, that's what they're looking for. The problem with private debt, infrastructure, private equity, of course, is it's illiquid, which can be a problem. If you ask Mr. Woodford, you'll find that out. That's Europe. And interestingly, in the UK, it's slightly different. It's more or less the same. By the way, also, you might be interested, because we do this in 18 countries, right? Continental Europe, there's a lot of agreement. Nordics are a bit different from the south and so on. But basically, they tend to correlate quite highly. The UK tends to be a little bit different. And Asia, again, but actually, like 90% agree on the same thing, no matter where you are. If you're in Hong Kong, Singapore, or if you're in Finland, you would more or less agree. So this is UK. This is basically all like DFMs and investment specialist IFAs and so on in the UK. And it's again, it's global emerging market equities. It's Asia, UK equities. So a lot of them are putting money back into UK equities, and they're doing so for two reasons on average. It's just turned down a bit now. It was 3 months ago they were putting a lot of money into it, but they're expected to put a little bit more in still. And it's because UK equities, for a start, are better value than European equities, and they are literally just reducing European equities, increasing UK equities because of Brexit, essentially, and because of sterling worries, but also because of the valuation. So a little bit of money back into UK equities. By the way, European continental people, so we did this survey as well. We said, who's going to lose out because of Brexit? Will it be the UK, continental Europe, or both? Or neither? Okay, no one said neither, so at least they're not stupid. But it was interesting. So basically, the European equity people, or the European fund buyers, they all said, who's going to lose out? 2/3 of them said, well, the UK is going to lose much worse than we are. The UK one said, oh, it'll be a 50-50 split. So that's nice. Not true, of course. So, US equities, however, is still expected to sell off US equities and still expected to sell off high-yield bonds. So that's certainly a no-go. But again, they'd like to buy infrastructure. They'd like to get into some of those areas. Asia, first of all, you can see I had to go up to 60 there because they're just irritatingly happy. They're much more so than in Europe and in the UK. But they're starting to be a little bit puzzled about what's going on in the rest of the world. They still don't like European equities or US equities, but they are super keen on Chinese equities, on Asian bonds, but only now in hard currencies, on global emerging markets, on frontiers, all that kind of stuff. But again, private equities up there as well. And they're still interested in hedge funds, which the rest of the world has kind of pulled out of. Now, unconstrained bonds, by the way, are back in. So in case you want to know, the last 3 months, all that money that was, Jupiter's unconstrained bond fund, all the strategic bond funds and so on, they did terribly, and now the money started to come back into those areas again. So it is something that the professionals are actually looking at one more time. I thought I'd talk about liquidity for my last thing, which is, of course, a massive issue for all of us. So it's interesting for two reasons. First of all, because of Woodford, and we're all going, well, what do we make of this? And as investors, what should we do about the fact that, about liquidity? And what should we ask for? There is a very common view, I would say probably, it's not universal, but it's a very common view, that if you demand liquidity as investors, daily liquidity, then you are losing out, on average, over the long term. Okay? There is an illiquidity premium. You are paid in order to lock your money away for a while. The problem is, because of regulation, because of all the crises that have happened, because of the global crisis and so on, suddenly all the regulators come in and everyone says, oh, you must have daily liquidity. And if you think you must have daily liquidity, you end up with Woodford. You end up with someone who sets up a fund, and we helped him launch, by the way, so I'm very involved in this. He sets up a fund in which he basically has to sort of promise daily liquidity. So he has all these listed companies, but where were they listed? In Guernsey, with no daily turnover, right? So he sort of put into a situation in which, they were apparently liquid, because they were listed at least. Liquid investments are liquid until they're not. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a mega cap. When there's a crisis, if there's a massive crisis in the world, and everyone wants to sell Apple, you still can't sell Apple, or you have to do so at a massive haircut. So I guess my message is overall, it's not a question of expecting fund managers to solve the problem by giving you somehow a magically liquid formula for what you need. It is up to you to just know that your money will be locked away for 5 years, and that is fine, because then you won't be the one to lose out when it finally all crashes. So there you go. That's the end of my rant. I hope you enjoyed it.